In this video, we're going to discuss the formulas for perimeter and area of 6 different shapes. So let's start with the rectangle. So a rectangle has 4 sides and it has 90-degree angles. This side is the same length as this side, and then this side is the same length as this side. And we can label them length and height, or side and length, however we want to. Our book defines it as length and width, with length generally being the longer side. So for perimeter, abbreviated P, what we're looking at is adding up the length of the entire shape. So we have a length, so that'd be L. We have a width, but then we have another length, and then we have another width. So another way to write this would be perimeter is length plus width, but then we have 2 of them, so we're going to multiply that by 2. And for all of these, the formula is simply adding up the lengths of all the sides of the shape. When we're figuring out the area is how much surface this shape is covering. And the way we figure that out is by multiplying length times width for a rectangle. And as far as units go, this would be something like feet or meters or inches. But for area, since it's a surface that it's taking the area up of, it would be feet squared, meters squared, inches squared. Okay, let's look at our second shape, the parallelogram. Parallelogram is simply a rectangle tilted on its side. So we still have 2 sides that are the same length, and then 2 other sides that are the same length. But now these angles are no longer 90 degrees. And we call it parallelogram because these 2 sides are parallel to one another, and these 2 sides are parallel to one another. And we're going to use slightly different letters for defining the parallelogram, but again, it doesn't really matter. You could use length and width if you wanted to. We're going to say that this is B for base, and this is S for side. And this is the convention that your book uses. So for the perimeter, we have 2 bases, and we have 2 sides. So the formula would be just like for rectangle. 2 times, in parentheses, base plus side. Now the area is where it gets a little bit different, and I want to just change my color so that we can see this very clearly. Okay, so for area, it's not simply base times side. What we need to do is drop a line down so that it's perpendicular, or makes a right angle right here. And we're going to call this H for height. Sometimes it's called the altitude. Now if you look at this, right here we've created a triangle. If you could just sort of mentally in your mind shift that triangle and stick it on over here. This is gone. That's no longer here. This is here. What we've created is a rectangle. So for the area, it is not base times side. It's base times height for the area of a parallelogram. All right, let's look at a square. So a square is similar to a rectangle in the fact that we have all right angles, But the difference is now we don't just have 2 sides that are of equal length, all 4 sides are of equal length. And we're going to label these with S's. So the perimeter is simply adding up all the sides. Well, there's 4 sides, so it's S plus S plus S plus S, or we can say 4S. And then our area is going to be length times width, or we can think of it as side times side, but S times S would be S squared. Our next shape is a rhombus. So a square and a rhombus are related to one another, just like a rectangle and a parallelogram are related to one another. A rhombus is simply a square that's tilted. So it's a parallelogram, except for the fact that all the sides are the same length. So it's kind of a special parallelogram. We're going to say that these are just sides because they're all the same length. So the perimeter would be 4 sides. But just like with the parallelogram, the formula for area is a little different. We have to drop that altitude or height right here so that we have a right angle right there, H. And if you can visualize it, take this triangle, chop it off, put it over here, you can see we've created a square. So the area of our triangle is side times height. All right, let's look at our next shape. Our next shape is the trapezoid. The trapezoid has a set of sides that are parallel to one another. So these sides are parallel. And then it has 2 sides which are not parallel. And I'm going to kind of exaggerate it so you can really see. These 2 sides are not parallel and they're not the same length. They could be the same length, but they don't have to be. So I'm going to label this as base 1 and label this as base 2. And then I'm going to call this A and C. The perimeter is simply adding up all the sides. So it's base 1 plus base 2 plus A plus C. The area is a little bit different. What we need to do, we know, as you can see from all the previous formulas, we do need to multiply 2 things together. And you might think it's a base times a height, which essentially it is, but we have to be a little bit creative. We have 2 bases. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the average of these 2 bases. So let me just do that right here. If you're going to take the average of 2 numbers, you add them together and you divide by 2. This is the same thing as pulling the 1/2 out and having B1 plus B2 in parentheses. So this is one of the things that we're going to multiply. 1/2 B1 plus B2. I know it looks like a lot, but it's just the average of these 2 bases. And then what we're going to do is we're going to multiply it by the height. And again, we have to drop an altitude. So let me do that in a different color. So there's our height or our altitude. And I'm going to stick it in right there. So the formula looks a little bit more difficult for a trapezoid, but the 1/2 and then in parentheses B1 plus B2, that's just the average of the 2 bases, and then it's multiplied by the height. Okay, our final shape is the triangle. Let's label this A, B, C. So the perimeter, we're adding up A plus B plus C. For the area, we need a height dropped as well, again. So here's our height. Remember, it has to be perpendicular right here. And most of the time, these heights are going to be given to you. It's not something that you're going to have to figure out. And it sort of follows along with this formula for the trapezoid. We're taking the average of two bases, and you'll see, well, there's really not a second base. But one way you can think about it is it's a point up here, and a point doesn't have any length. So you're going to take the average of the base plus 0 divided by 2. Another way to write that would be 1/2 base. So we're going to take 1/2 base, and we're going to multiply it by the height. And that's the formula for the area of the triangle.